Hello, and welcome to a reading from The Chronicles of Emily Spellmaker in no particular order. Emily Spellmaker on All Hallows Eve, written by S.W. Devlin and read by Christopher Davis. The small girl stepped out of the morning mist as if she had appeared from the mountain air. Her black patent leather shoes left no mark as she silently walked through the graveyard. She couldn't remember the last time she'd visited Frog Hollow, but old abandoned Turtle Hall, once the jewel of the valley, had been condemned, and its days were numbered. If she was going to say goodbye, it had to be soon. She had not intended to linger in the cemetery. Today it looked particularly sad, though. The vines had covered many of the small stones, the grass stood high, empty cans and bottles were strewn about the place, evidence that the only visitors the graves ever received were bored teenagers with no use for the memories of people from other lifetimes. Hilltop Cemetery was the graveyard's official name, though you might not know it, as the wrought iron arch that once stood above the entrance had rusted and collapsed into the weeds. To the locals, it had always been known as Pauper's Yard, an inexpensive place the poor and lonely could be buried, somewhere out of the way. It was unmaintained except for the occasional good deeds, which were growing rarer and rarer these days. Some of the stones were hundreds of years old, others only decades, but they looked as if they were the same age. No one had come to visit them. "I wonder who you all are," she said aloud. Then, just before she could leave, a single stone caught her eye. It had been vandalized, kicked, punched, or struck with something heavy until it collapsed, broken in two. Its engraving was badly decayed. What was left of it was filled with moss and covered with red spray paint graffiti that read, "Looser," although that was likely not the word its author had intended. He needed to practice his spelling. She knelt by the stone and ran her index finger through what was left of the worn-away grooves of the letters, and as she did they seemed to come to life, revealing themselves to someone who might care. The stone read, "Owen Rowland, born 1924, died of a broken heart, 1948. She frowned, but it was time for her to leave. Frog Hollow ran from the top of the mountain all the way to the river that had carved the valley below. A central, ridiculously steep main street began just below the cemetery and ran downhill more than a mile to the riverside park. All manner of shops and businesses lined each side of the road. As she made her descent, the little girl saw a town bustling with activity. Only the old dance school, which had stood there as long as anyone could remember, was boarded up. The teachers and its most famous student had long since passed away. On the side streets, the little girl saw rows of modest but proud wood and brick houses built on the hillside. They all had lawns of varying sizes, beautiful to look at, but hard to play in, given how steep the mountain was. The sun was shining brightly as she neared her destination. Turtle Hall was big enough to be seen from a good distance. Even in ruin, with its damaged slate roof and collapsing brick and stone chimneys, it was more magnificent than anything that had been built here in the last 175 years. The river flowed happily in front of the mansion, and on its far bank were the railroad tracks that had once carried Frog Hollow coal to the great steel companies in Bethlehem, Pittsburgh, and Lackawanna. But that was a long time ago. The steel companies went out of business, and the mine closed. When the Miller family went bankrupt, their mansion sat empty to slowly decay. No one had the money to maintain it. Now the developers had bought it, and Turtle Hall would be cleared to make way for new houses. The estate was lined with temporary wire fencing, joined by a chained gate at the top of the cobblestone driveway. A large backhoe, a piece of construction equipment with an arm and a claw that could dig and batter and tear things, sat atop a mound of earth that it had used to fill in the reflecting pond. Soon it would help destroy the house, too. As big as Turtle Hall was, a crane with a wrecking ball was also there to help take it down. The girl picked up a stick from the ground outside the gate and pointed it at the lock. There was a and the lock fell open, dropping to the ground and dragging its chain down with it. The gate swung open out of courtesy. She walked in. "Hey, kid!" called a gruff voice from behind the backhoe. It was a construction worker. "You can't come in here!" She ignored him. Around the back of the mansion, underneath the multi-tiered back patio that led to the gardens, was a servant's door to the basement kitchen. The unkempt bushes almost completely hid it, and she had to force her way through their branches. Once she did, she found the door rotted away and easy to pry open. She made her way through the hall to the kitchen, then to the secret back staircase that led upstairs to the dining room. No person had walked up these steps since the last time she had. "Hey, kid!" the man called from outside. "Where did you go?" Where she had gone was through the walnut-paneled dining room and into the central hallway, up the massive curved staircase, into the west wing, past bedroom after bedroom after bedroom, to the third-floor library, where she pushed the pocket doors open, sliding them into the wainscoted plaster walls, then pulling them closed behind her. The bookshelves were still filled with books and framed black-and-white photos from another time. Everything was coated in dust, mold, and cobwebs. "Neat," she said. She made her way to the Charles Dickens section, then looked for a particular volume just past it on the same shelf. As she did, she could hear the man searching in the floors below, then running up the stairs. "Little girl, are you up here?" "No," she answered, loud enough for him to hear. Even with him coming, she took her time until she found the specific book she was looking for. Its spine read, "Collins, the Woman in White." That's when the spider jumped out. It was a big, fat, crab-like spider that stood on the bookshelf, looking her in the eyes, holding its pincer arms up and out at the girl in a semicircle. There was no mistaking its gesture. She smiled and made the universal hug sign in return. "Hello, Miss Emily," the spider said once their virtual hug was complete. "Hello, Milton. It's good to see you. How are Jennifer and the kids?" she asked. "The kids have all gone to college. We are empty Webbers now." "They grow up so fast." "Yes, they do. Jennifer will be sad she missed you. She's inspecting our new home. We are going south for retirement." "The weather will be much nicer, I'm sure." "Still, so many memories here." "Wonderful memories," she agreed. Then the pocket doors opened, and the big burly construction worker had found her. He was 6'4", 300 pounds easy. He was built of muscle and had a big daddy belly. "Look, I don't mean to be mean or nothing, but you can't be in here. It's not safe. These floors are weak, and there are bats and squirrels and raccoons in here." The little girl eyed him up. She suspected that underneath his rough exterior he was probably a teddy bear. "I like bats and squirrels and raccoons," she told him truthfully. "Maybe so, but I still need to take you outside and off the grounds. There are better places for a girl like you to play." That was unlikely. Besides, "I didn't come to play," she confessed. "What did you come to do?" "Mostly I came to say goodbye to Turtle Hall, but as it turns out, I left something here a long time ago that I need." "A long time ago? How old are you, 9, 10? "That's what my parents tell people. But I am a witch. I am thousands of years old. Probably." "I've never met a witch before," the man said, humoring the strange little girl. "I'm a contractor. I build things." "But first you tear things down," Emily replied accusingly. She was toying with the idea of turning him into a frog. He'd never be able to operate heavy machinery then. Besides, he might like being a frog for a bit. "When I have to. It doesn't mean I like it. I got a job to do." "Do you like your job, Mr. Joe the contractor?" she asked him, calling him by his name, even though he hadn't told it to her. He decided she must have read his ID badge, except he wasn't wearing one. "I do like my job," he answered without hesitating. "I'm good at it. I got a wife and 3 kids. My daughter is kind of like you." Kind of. "I put food on the table and a good roof over our heads, and one day my kids will go to college." Emily smiled. He sounded like a good dad. "I try to show respect to the places I have to knock down," Joe went on while Emily listened attentively. "A lot of guys, well, they're good guys, but they just don't care." "Turtle Hall has a history," Emily told him. "A great one." "They all do, even the smallest run-down shack. That was somebody's home once. They wanted better for it than what it got, and when it's gone, well, it's gone. The more the little witch listened, the more she thought she might like him, as a person, not a frog. "When will you knock down Turtle Hall?" she asked him. "Today?" "Not until November 1st, the day after Halloween." "I wonder where its soul will go." "It's a house." "Yes," Emily agreed. "I wonder where the house's soul will go." "Houses don't have souls." Emily choked back a laugh. "Don't be silly. What's your favorite room in this mansion?" "I don't have one." "You do," Emily corrected him. "When I leave, go to it. Place your hand on the wall. It will talk to you." "Like a ghost?" "No, not like a ghost. The way a house does when you open yourself up to it." "I don't think it'll like me very much." "Maybe not, but it might understand you, and that's something." "How old are you again?" "Like you said, I better go. I'll need a minute alone with my friend first, if you don't mind waiting outside." Joe didn't really want to leave her alone, as he didn't know what she was up to, but he found the strange little girl oddly compelling. So he waited outside and watched while a raccoon scurried down the hallway past him and into one of the bedrooms. "You'll be wanting the flower vase," Milton noted when he came out of hiding. "Yes," Emily said, sliding that one specific book out of its place on the shelf. Hidden behind it was a small, thin ceramic vase, just big enough to hold a dandelion. Emily lifted it and dumped its contents into her hand. A single golden pumpkin seed fell into her palm. "Got you," she said. "Is this goodbye?" Milton asked. "No, I have work to do. I'll come another day to say goodbye." Emily dropped the seed into her coat pocket and opened the doors. "See you soon," Milton said. "Who were you talking to?" Joe asked when Emily emerged from the library. "An old friend." They walked from the house in silence and up the driveway to the gate. "Sorry I had to kick you out," Joe said. "You do a lot of construction work, don't you?" Emily asked abruptly. "Yeah, I'm the best guy to get the job done for 100 miles. 200 maybe." "Do you know someone who can do this?" Emily handed him a blank 3x5 note card. Despite the fact that it had no visible words on it, Joe seemed to read it. "That's real soon. It could be expensive." "But you can find somebody?" "I'll tell you what. I like you, Emily," Emily said. "I like you, Emily the Witch. I'll do it myself." "Thank you, Joe the Contractor. I like you, too. Goodbye for now," she said. Then she set off on the long, steep walk up the hill. She was on a mission. Atop the hill, Emily walked into the cemetery and went straight to the broken stone. She didn't seem to notice the two boys sitting by the nameless grave marker in the far corner. She knelt directly in front of the base where the stone had stood, over the ground where Owen Rowland was buried. She took a stick from the grass, or maybe it was her wand, or both, and she began to dig a narrow, deep hole. The boys came over to investigate. "Hey, little girl," called the pudgy red-headed one. "What are you doing?" "Planting a pumpkin seed," she replied without looking at him. "Why?" asked the other one, who was taller and dark-haired. "Because I want to." "I didn't say you could," said the redhead, acting like a bully. "You can't spell," Emily told him, looking him in the eyes. "Oh, really?" he said, stepping back and swinging his arms wide, trying to look menacing. "How would you know?" "You've got red spray paint on your clothes. Does that make you the loser?" His friend burst into hysterical laughter. "Your mom is going to ground you, Billy." "Shut up, Richie," the one named Billy shouted, suddenly upset. "I'm going to count to 3, little girl, and when I do—" "I am going to turn you into a hamster," Emily threatened, politely. Billy stopped, confused. "Hear that, Billy? This little girl's going to turn you into a hamster. I can't wait." "Oh, yeah? How you going to do that?" Billy demanded. "Count to 3, and I'll show you," Emily replied. But Billy did not count. "Let's get out of here, Billy. This girl's a freak." "A witch, actually." "She thinks she's a witch, Richie." "Little girls are so cute," Richie said. "Except this one. She's kind of ugly, if you ask me." They both laughed at Emily, but she didn't care. She took the magic seed from her purse and cradled it in her hands. "Tell me the story of Owen Roland," she whispered so only the seed could hear. Then she dropped the seed into the hole and pushed the loose earth back over it, finally patting it down. "I'll see you soon," she told it, loud and clear. Emily stood and went to leave. For just a moment the boys blocked her way, but she looked into them. Not at them, into them. Chills ran up and down their spines, and they stepped back so she could pass. Once she was far enough away for them to safely act tough again, they got to it. Richie dropped down and started frantically digging so he could throw Emily's seed away. "Hey, kid," Billy called after her. "Don't ever let me catch you around here again." But she had already gone. It was October 30th, Mischief Night. In the dark, alone in the graveyard, Billy and Richie tried to figure out what to do about the large, shiny pumpkin that had grown from the tiny seed that weird little girl had planted just the day before. They'd smashed pumpkins all up and down Main Street, throwing them into the road. They'd coated the neighborhood trees and yards in toilet paper. They'd put shaving cream all over the windshields of parked cars, but they couldn't seem to sort out this one simple pumpkin. Richie thought he'd thrown the seed into the woods after the creepy little girl left, but the pumpkin still grew where she'd planted it anyway. So they tried to pull it off the vine. It wouldn't budge. They tried to cut the vine. It was stronger than a steel cable. Billy lifted the pumpkin and slammed it into the ground, hitting his friend in the process. Richie collapsed, holding his foot and shouting words boys shouldn't say. But the pumpkin was fine. So Billy took a baseball bat from the red wagon they'd brought to hold the shaving cream and toilet paper, and he hit the pumpkin. He hit it again, and again, and again. When the bat broke, he found an old rusted shovel in the woods. He stabbed at the pumpkin. The blade wouldn't penetrate the skin. He whacked it. Nothing. "What gives?" Billy cried, frustrated. "No pumpkin can do this," Richie answered, sitting on the ground, massaging his swollen foot. "A magic one can," said a little girl's voice from behind them. "Ah!" Both boys screamed, startled by Emily's sudden appearance. "Nice to see you too," Emily greeted them. "I've come for my pumpkin." "You mean our pumpkin," Billy corrected her. "No, he doesn't like you." "Who, this pumpkin?" Billy asked insincerely. Then he swung the shovel so far behind his head that he whacked Richie in the process. "Ow!" cried Richie as the metal shovel blade bounced off his head. Billy swung the shovel down on the pumpkin and hit it squarely, causing the shovel to rebound from the pumpkin and smack Billy in his own face. He dropped the shovel and fell to the ground. "Ow! Ow! 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 Ow!" he shouted. "Told you," Emily said, matter-of-factly. "Just wait till I get up," Billy threatened her. "You and you," Emily abruptly commanded. Billy and Richie looked at her attentively, but then they realized who it was she was speaking to. The shovel and the wagon had snapped to attention, the shovel floating upright in the air, and the wagon rolling to Emily. "What's happening?" Richie asked his mother, who wasn't there. "Hide yourself until I need you," she told the shovel. With that, the shovel flew in a great arc and came down back in the woods where Billy had found it. Then she looked at the wagon. It was filled with toilet paper and shaving cream cans. "Take this back to the grocery store so someone can use it properly." With that, the wagon rolled out of the cemetery and headed down Main Street under its own power. Billy and Richie were both standing bolt upright, shaking. "Look, little girl, I told you never to come around here again." Billy tried to be brave. He wasn't any good at it. "And I told you I'd turn you into a hamster," Emily told him. "Yeah," said Richie excitedly. "She did." "But it's okay. I was never going to turn you into a hamster," Emily assured him. Billy knew it. She was bluffing. He sneered at her as he rolled up his sleeves and balled up his fists, looking as threatening as he could. Then he counted 1, 2, 3. "Bat!" Emily shouted, pointing at Billy with a big smile on her face. Just like that, Billy was nowhere to be found, but a bat was now circling Emily and Richie. "Hey!" cried Richie. "Hey!" cried the bat. "Did you just turn Billy into a bat?" "Yes," Emily answered, with a big excited smile. She was proud of herself. "Much better than a hamster, don't you think?" This creepy little girl just turned you into a bat. Richie laughed at his friend. He wasn't scared anymore. He thought it was great. In response, the bat began to dive-bomb Richie. You think this is funny? Bat called at his friend. Hey, get him away from me, you stupid little witch, Richie begged as rudely as possible. Emily had a better idea. Do it yourself, cat, she answered, pointing at Richie. A small black cat sat where Richie had been. When Bat passed through the air above it, the cat leapt, and there came the slight, leathery sound of claws against wings. Ow! Cried Bat. He doubled down and swooped on Cat again. You two, Emily commanded. This time it wasn't a shovel and a wagon she was talking to. It was a cat and a bat. Do you want to be teenage boys again? Yes, they answered. Then for starters, don't harm each other. Now, we have a pumpkin to take home. Emily put her fingers in the corners of her mouth and whistled like she was calling a faithful horse in an old Western movie. The wagon returned, rolling back into the graveyard and up to Emily, empty of its previous contents. Cat and Bat were so surprised that neither thought to ask Emily what she meant by home. Emily bent and picked up the pumpkin, pulling it off the vine effortlessly, as if it had been the easiest thing you could do. She placed it in the center of the wagon. There, Emily said. Then she climbed into the wagon herself, facing forwards, one leg on each side of the pumpkin, holding the handle for steering. Cat, get in front. Me? The front? Cat asked for clarification. I'd put you in the back, but you are a cat. Once we start moving, you are just going to climb on the dash or the steering and meow while you lose your mind. What if I don't get in? Cat asked. Enjoy being a cat. There are plenty of mice for you in the grass. Cat jumped in and faced forwards, 2 paws on the front wall of the wagon bed. Bat, Emily called. What? Keep up, if you can. Emily faced forward, and the wagon knew what to do. It rolled forward, carrying Cat, Pumpkin, and Witch out of Hilltop Cemetery and on to Main Street, with Bat fluttering alongside. They descended at lightning speed. As Cat looked on, wide-eyed in terror, he began howling and wailing, helpfully providing a siren to tell the good people of Frog Hollow to look out. The sun set early this time of year, and even though it had been dark for some time, the shops were still open and plenty of people were out and about to witness a crazy young girl in a black dress with an orange top and orange leggings as she raced down the mountain with a black cat and a pumpkin, pursued by a bat that seemed to be screaming, "Wait for me! Wait for me!" Emily steered around the people with seeming ease. She couldn't use the road, so the sidewalk had to make do. But as each block ended, they were reminded that they had no brakes. If no car was coming, Emily simply let them go airborne, flying over the road and onto the opposite sidewalk further down the hill. This was great fun for all, except for Cat, who was still in full siren mode. Sometimes, however, cars were coming. On those occasions, Emily had to make sudden 90-degree turns down side streets, ducking pedestrians before using any available driveway to cross to the other side. Cat thought about puking. But Bat was having the bigger problem. With each block that passed, he began to have to avoid his earlier mischief, as the toilet paper hanging from the trees blew in the wind, reaching out to swipe at him. Midway down Main Street, Emily noticed that there was someone inside the abandoned dance studio. The second-floor lights were on, the window boards were gone, and for just a moment she caught a glimpse of a young, golden-blonde ballerina dancing. Then she remembered. You should never take your eyes off the road, even if you are a witch. The wagon rolled into the street, and now they were headed straight for oncoming traffic at high speed. Cat wailed. The pumpkin just sat there all stoic and smug like it was a pumpkin or something. Emily steered the wagon into the opposite sidewalk, but there was no driveway waiting for them. Wham! Cat, Emily, and Pumpkin went airborne as the wagon flipped. Ha! Bat began. Then he crashed through a long strand of toilet paper. With the tissue in his face, he couldn't see where he was flying, until he hit the next strand of toilet paper. And the next. And the next. Emily cartwheeled in the air alongside the pumpkin. A little help, she summoned. Then suddenly she landed in the lowest bough of one of the trees that lined the sidewalk. The pumpkin landed in her lap. Cat was not so lucky. Bat crashed into him, knocking them both onto the windshield of a car they had visited earlier on this particular evening. As they slid through the shaving cream and down across the hood, they managed to partially clean up after themselves, even if unintentionally. The little red wagon was fine. It had simply somersaulted onto all four wheels. It brought itself to a stop beneath Emily, and she stepped down into the bed, reassuming her position with the pumpkin safely between her knees. Then they rolled alongside the car and waited for Cat and Bat's slow, foamy slide to complete. Finally, the two troublemakers dropped off the front of the hood and into the wagon. Cat put his paws over his eyes. "This is just a bad dream. This is just a bad dream," he told himself as they took off down the hill as fast as before. This time, however, they did not crash. The construction fence gate knew just what to do, and when they turned into the driveway, the lock popped open and the gate swung wide. Once they rolled to a stop in front of Turtle Hall, it closed and locked behind them and waited for further instructions. "Home!" Emily cried. Turtle Hall was the creepiest place Cat or Bat had ever been. It was massive, dark, coated in dust and cobwebs, and you could hear all manner of creatures scurrying about in the blackness. "I'm scared," complained Cat. "Of what?" Emily asked. "You are a cat. You can see." "You're right," Cat shouted excitedly. "I can! This is so cool!" "Look at me. I'm a cat. I'm so cool," Bat taunted him. "I'd rather be a cat than... What are you supposed to be anyway, a mummy?" Emily snorted a laugh in the darkness. She knew Bat was still wrapped in toilet paper and sitting in the wagon she pulled behind her because he couldn't fly. "Just wait till I get out of this." "Then you'll what?" Cat asked, soft-pawing Bat several times to show who was in charge. "Get him away from me, you crazy witch!" "Ask nicely," Emily replied. "Please, Miss Crazy Witch!" "Quiet, all of you. I can't hear my way to the servant's kitchen." "What's a servant's kitchen?" "This," Emily said, throwing the light switch as they walked into a very large square kitchen on the lower level of the mansion. Antiquated electric light bulbs illuminated the room for the first time in decades. "The lights still work?" Bat asked. Long-abandoned mansions weren't usually known for their working electricity. "For me, but just this once. They owe me a favor." In the soft glow of the ancient light fixtures, they could see pots and pans hanging all around them. Emily placed the giant magic pumpkin in the center of the huge butcher's block table. It would give her plenty of room to work. Cat jumped up on one corner of the table to watch. Then Emily pointed at Bat and unraveled his inadvertent mummy costume. He dropped off the side of the wagon and crawled across the floor looking for something to climb. Cat paid no attention to him as he was busily licking the shaving cream from his black fur. Oddly enough, he found that he had a taste for it. A moment later, Bat dropped from the tallest cabinet, caught air in his wings, and swooped low, knocking Cat to the floor. "Hey!" Cat protested after barely landing on his feet. Then a large spider scurried in front of him, and he reflexively pounced, snatching the unfortunate arachnid up in his mouth as a quick snack. But before he could swallow, something occurred to him. "I got a spider in my mouth! I got a spider in my mouth! I got a spider in my mouth!" He ran screaming through the kitchen, bouncing off walls and running up cabinets to the ceiling. He leapt onto the chandelier before finally crashing down on the table next to the pumpkin. The impact of the landing triggered his gag reflex, and the spider was ejected onto the table in front of Emily, who'd been watching the whole display with considerable interest. "Hello, Milton. I'm back," Emily said. "Nice friends you have," Milton replied sarcastically. "Manners are not their forte. I trust you are unscathed?" "Yes, we need not discuss this transaction further." "That spider talks!" Bat cried. "That bat talks," Milton came back at him. "Milton, I need your help. I need a newspaper." Milton thought. "Second floor, third bedroom on the left." "Lindy's old room?" "Exactly. Look behind the dollhouse." "Bat, go get it," Emily commanded, sending him from the room with a flick of her finger. They heard some crashing noises as he occasionally missed turns and bounced off things. There was a small shattering of glass and some mumbled words that neither a bat nor a teenage boy should say. Then, after a few minutes, he returned. He flew into the room with a yellowed paper 10 times his own size trailing from his hind claws. Emily lifted the pumpkin, and Bat dropped the paper directly on top of Cat, who quickly climbed out and fled to the safety of the wagon bed. Emily opened the paper all the way up and spread it over the table. Chicago Daily Tribune, Emily read. November 4th, 1948. She shrugged. This would be as good as any for carving a pumpkin. Now she just needed a knife. When she opened the kitchen drawers, they were all still filled with silverware. Actual silverware. She seized the sharpest blade she could find and one giant spoon. Then she approached the pumpkin. "Soon we will have a jack-o'-lantern," Milton noted approvingly. "Yes, but the O'Lantern family isn't all jacks," Emily told them. "I've been trying to guess his name so I can properly wake him. If I knew his name, I could get his face right. If I saw his face, I could determine his name." "That isn't going to fix itself," Bat responded. "No, which is why we are going to guess until we get it right." Cat and Bat circled the pumpkin while Emily cut open his top, giving him an irregular star-shaped lid. When she lifted the top off, she reached in and felt around and pulled something out. She held it up to the light for all to see. In her fingers, she held a single golden pumpkin seed. "Milton, you know the drill." Milton took the seed from Emily and ran up the pipes, taking the shortcut through the ceiling to the third-floor library, where he would place the seed safely in the hidden dandelion vase. When he returned, Emily had finished covering the newspaper in the pumpkin's insides. "What do you think?" she asked them all. Cat took the first guess. "Bill?" "He's a pumpkin, not a gray," Emily said. "I see your point," Milton agreed. Bat and Cat looked at each other, not following them at all. Cat gave up and started drinking milk from a saucer Emily had placed out for him. "Bat," Emily summoned. Yes?" "Tell me his name." "Floyd?" Bat guessed. Cat shot milk through his nose. "It's a perfectly good guess," Bat objected. "It's not just a good guess," Emily answered. "It's his name. Behold, Floyd O'Lantern." Floyd O'Lantern didn't look like much at first, but armed with his name, Emily quickly finished carving him. He had 2 triangle eyes, one pointing up and one pointing down. He had a circle for a nose and a mouth that curved up on one side and down on the other. Depending on which side you stood, he was happy or angry. Viewed head-on, your perception of him would reveal more about you than about him. Emily was quite proud of herself, even if her carving job would not have won her grade school's annual carving competition. Cat, Bat, and Milton all nodded in approval. And now, the final touch. The little witch resumed raiding the kitchen cabinets until she found a short, thick candle. She reached inside Floyd O'Lantern and wedged it securely but crookedly in his bottom. "Uh-oh," Milton said. "What?" she asked him. "We don't have any matches." "We don't need them," she replied. "Watch." The electric lights cut out, their debt of honor to the witch paid in full. In the sudden pitch black, Emily bellowed, "Floyd O'Lantern, I command you to tell us a story." The candle wick burst into flame before them, brilliant orange light pouring forth from the carved pumpkin, filling the room with a glow that was both warm and ominous. Then the creature spoke. "Who summons me?" he demanded. Emily's face filled with glee. "I do! Emily Spellmaker, the witch! Rough and Ready Elementary School, creator of the Witchwood. Probably." Floyd's face changed expression several times as he scrutinized her in his magic light. "Witches are strange things on their best days," he insulted her with the truth. "I don't trust them." "You are a talking pumpkin pie. You have no frame of reference." "True, but I am almost several minutes old now, and I know many things." Cat jumped onto the table, eyes wide, and began sniffing Floyd suspiciously. "You know one story, and I command you to tell it." "As you may, for it is my purpose. But the formalities must be observed at all times. Tell me what story. If it is not the one I know, I will speak to you no more." "He's moody," complained Bat. "Silence!" Floyd commanded, his light bursting forth with his anger. Bat fluttered back to a safe distance. Cat scrambled off the table, shredding the remnants of the soggy newspaper. Emily was unfazed. "This is a bit of a phony technicality, if you ask me. I'm the one who told you what story to learn in the first place." "I know," Floyd admitted, somewhat dejected. "But this is my only time to shine. Can't you just roll with it?" Emily rolled with it. She was having fun. "I command you to tell me the story of Owen Roland." For just a moment, both sides of Floyd's mouth curved upwards in a happy smile. "You have chosen wisely, strange little witch," Floyd replied. "I wouldn't call her that if I was you," Bat warned. Floyd ignored him. "Gather round and listen closely, for I shall tell you the story of Owen Roland, the orphan who died of a broken heart." "Orphan? This is getting worse for him already," Cat observed. "Orphan, indeed," Floyd wailed ominously. "His story begins on the front steps of the Centralia Orphanage and Children's Home on a cold winter night. The doorbell rang, and when a nurse opened the front door, she discovered a baby wrapped in tattered blankets and placed in a wicker basket. Pinned to the baby's blanket was a handwritten note. It read, "Please, take this baby and give him the good home he deserves. Call him Owen after his dear departed father. Give him the love I cannot, for my time is short." The nurse looked all around, but could only see a woman's footprints fading in the softly falling snow. Owen was taken in and given the best life the orphanage could provide. They gave him the surname Roland for reasons he would never know. Owen spent the first 18 years of his life as a ward of the state. His birth parents were never found, and no new parents came to adopt him. But it did not matter. Owen was a happy child despite it all. He liked sports, especially football. He got along with others quite easily, and had a great imagination to keep him company during the times he was alone. On a rainy day, he would read or invent stories while playing with the orphanage's hand-me-down toys. But most importantly, he was happy because he met a girl in school. Her name was Elizabeth. Elizabeth Oglethorpe. "That's not a real name," Bat said. "It is a fine name," Floyd corrected him, his orange light suddenly terrifying. Elizabeth came from a poor but loving family. She loved to dance, and her father took a second job to afford the tuition at Ophelia Blaupunkt Academy of Dance, the most famous school in the region. "Owen went to dance school?" Cat asked. "No. Owen and Elizabeth met in 7th grade in science class. After school, Elizabeth went to her dance classes. At first, Owen thought she didn't like him. She would ignore him or quickly walk away when he came near. But other times he would catch her looking at him, like she'd been doing it for some time." "Girls make no sense," Bat told Cat. Cat and Milton nodded. "Don't get me started on boys," Emily threatened the three of them. But Elizabeth did like him, and Owen liked her. Elizabeth had flowing blonde hair that was almost golden in the right light. Her blue eyes looked into his soul. He was tall and strong, with dark hair and dark eyes that filled Elizabeth with a sense of mystery. Once they became friends, they were inseparable. Sometimes Owen snuck into the dance school to spy on Elizabeth as she danced. She knew, and she liked it. Those times she would dance just for him, until the faculty discovered his hiding place and evicted him. She would steal glances at him as he was led off by the arm, looking back at her, hoping for a shy smile. She gave it to him some days, and made him wait for it on others. They ran through the streets of Frog Hollow, sometimes hand in hand, sometimes one chasing the other, as they laughed joyously. Many nights they lay in the grass, head against head, looking up at the vast sky above them. There was a pair of stars in the sky that were always close to each other. At certain times of the year they would align and appear as one brighter star. "That's our star," Owen told Elizabeth. "How can a star be ours?" Elizabeth wanted to know. "I'll tell you how," he answered her. "I'm going to give you the universe one day." Deep down, Elizabeth believed him. When he was 17, Owen got a job as a firefighter. He didn't like being away from Elizabeth, but it was interesting, and to her he was a hero. The night of the Great Frog Hollow Fire— "What's great about a fire?" Cat interrupted. "Not great as in good, great as in giant. Huge, the biggest thing anyone had ever seen," Floyd explained. "Oh, can something great be huge and good?" "Of course," Emily answered him. "As I was saying," Floyd continued, all indignant, "the night of the Great Frog Hollow Fire, the upper business district went up in flames. Frog Hollow Station No. 1 fought the fire valiantly as the horrified townspeople watched. If the firefighters failed, the lower business district would be engulfed in flames, starting with the famous dance school. Owen and Chief Randall Jones fell through the roof of the movie theater when it collapsed." Milton gasped. "Owen fractured his back. Chief Jones died. He had a wife and kids." A silent gloom filled the room out of respect. The lower district did not burn. Elizabeth spent every night with Owen in the hospital, bringing him his homework so he could graduate high school at the end of the year. A new world waited for them, but before they graduated, the war came. "I will return to you," Owen promised Elizabeth when he shipped out for combat. "Promise me," she begged him. They both knew they must never lose each other. Overseas, Owen fought the Axis as valiantly as he'd fought fires at home. On the beaches of Normandy he lost so many brothers: Garcia, Cole, Merlino, Manning, Stoltzfutz, Cleary, Blavitz. The names go on forever. "But Owen lived," Milton said. "Owen lived that day and fought through to Berlin." "He killed people?" Bat asked. "War is the most terrible thing there is," Floyd told him. "Owen did what he had to do, nothing more, nothing less. He took many prisoners, always refusing to shoot another person when he had the option." "He doesn't sound so bad," Bat reflected. In 1945, Owen returned home to Frog Hollow, anxious to pick up with Elizabeth where they left off. But the world had changed while he was gone. Elizabeth's dancing had caught the eye of several New York talent agents, and she was rapidly becoming famous by small-town standards. The agents thought she could be famous by big-time standards, too. All she had to do was move to New York, and stay single, just as she'd been while Owen was away fighting the war. Owen never thought he'd lose her. He quickly got the best job he could find, so he could show her he could be a success. He became an encyclopedia salesman. He had his own territory to work. He had a car and an apartment. Then he bought a ring. It was a small diamond, the best an encyclopedia salesman could buy, and it cost him dearly. But he knew it was worth it. He loved his Elizabeth. He was so afraid she was slipping away, that she wasn't his Elizabeth anymore. Then he found her in the dance school one day, packing her things. She was leaving. Owen got down on one knee and produced the box holding the ring. He opened it, and when he did, he opened his heart to her wider than he would ever open it to anyone again. Owen asked her to marry him. Elizabeth had tears in her eyes. He'd asked her to choose between two worlds. She couldn't have both. The agents had Rolls-Royce limousines. They had penthouses in Manhattan and private club memberships in all the great cities. They had summer homes in the Hamptons and Cape Cod. They had Broadway roles and deals with the movie producers they partied with. Owen was a small-town boy who sold encyclopedias. How could he ever give her the universe, especially when they could make her one of the stars in its sky. She said no. Elizabeth kept his ring, even though he needed the money. She said she wanted it to remember him by. He was too heartbroken and too shamed to demand it back. He told her he knew she'd be a big star, and wished her all the luck in the world. Then he walked home alone as Elizabeth rode away in a long black limo, headed for a better life, without him. Owen looked up in the sky. The stars had drifted farther apart than they ever had before. They would never be one again. "I don't like Elizabeth," Emily confessed. And so Owen Roland found himself alone. He stopped looking up at the night sky. He stopped paying attention to anything but his work. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find his joy. This went on for some time, years in fact, and during that time it became harder and harder to make a living selling encyclopedias. They were expensive. Many families couldn't afford them. The ones that did buy them wouldn't need new ones for years. At first, that just meant Owen had to work harder, but eventually hard work wasn't enough. One day, Owen had driven for hours and hours in the pouring rain. He had gone door to door. With each failure, he had to try harder to stay positive and upbeat. Finally, he drove home, worried about gas money for tomorrow, which was going to require he drive even further from his modest apartment. When he got home, he was very tired, and he did not feel well. He wasn't very hungry, and he did not want to eat dinner by himself, so he just went to bed. He did not wake up. There was a pause. Emily, Milton, Cat, and Bat waited for more. "The end," Floyd added for the purpose of clarification. "What a rip-off!" Cat shouted. "That's a lousy story." "Yes, it is," Emily agreed. Floyd's light dimmed in the face of his rejection. He'd tried his best. "See? Owen was a loser!" Bat cried. Emily flicked Cat into the air, and the feline swiped, sending Bat fluttering away in panic. Okay! Emily looked about the mansion that only had one night left after this one. Emily," Bat asked when he came back. "Yes, Bat." "Why is your hair flowing in the wind?" "Is there a problem?" she asked. "There isn't any wind," Cat explained, mildly alarmed. "Oh," she replied, noticing that she was wearing her mood like only a witch can. "It's going to take a lot to fix this." "Fix what?" Cat asked. "This," Emily shouted, annoyed. It was obvious. Turtle Hall is getting knocked down. Owen died of a broken heart, and Floyd didn't get to tell a happy story. We have to do something. We have to fix what we can. "But I have no more stories to tell," Floyd admitted sadly. He wanted to help. He wanted to tell a happy story. "Oh, yes, you do. The story you are going to tell hasn't happened yet. It is just beginning." "But I can only learn one," Floyd told her. That was true, and she knew it. "You can only learn one, but this one you are going to live. You are going to see it with your own two triangle eyes." Floyd grew brighter. That would work. He could do that. "What are we going to do?" Bat wanted to know. "Find all the stationery you can," Emily instructed him. "Stationery?" he asked, apparently unfamiliar with the word. "Stuff to write with. What do they teach you in—" Never mind. Teachers aren't to blame for you two." Emily was frustrated. Rather than face her wrath, Cat and Bat set off in search of stuff to write with, while Emily began counting something in her head. When her animal friends returned, they'd brought her sandwich wrappers from the work crew's trash can and a fountain pen lost in the mansion sometime around 1926. "Perfect!" Emily cried. She touched one stack of wrappers, and in Floyd's glow, they turned into a specific number of beautiful blank cards. She touched another stack, and it became lace envelopes, one for each card. Emily blew the dust off the fountain pen and tested it. It worked, because, of course it did. She needed it to. Over the next few minutes, Bat, Cat, Milton, and Floyd watched as Emily wrote frantically. When she had finished, she had created a stack of orange, rectangular invitation cards, all written in beautiful black calligraphy. And this is what they said. And I mean said, as in, when you looked at them, the cards read their message in a spooky voice inside your head. You are cordially invited to the Great Frog Hollow Halloween Ball. Turtle Hall by the river, October the 31st, sunset to midnight. All manner of food and entertainment provided. Music by DJ Floyd. Come as you are. Your hosts, Emily, Milton, Bat, and Cat, and probably Mr. Joe, too. With the invitations complete, Emily set about filling the envelopes with names from her memory. Most of the invitations were addressed to people living or dead. One cryptically read, "Fireflies, somewhere in summertime." "Do you spell Elizabeth with a Z or an S?" she asked. "I clearly pronounced it with an S," Floyd replied, indignant. "So you did, my bad," Emily told him. She finished her work and stood to leave. "Milton, we will return. Keep your watch. The rest of you, to the wagon," she ordered. "The wagon?" Bat asked. "Where are we going?" Emily looked determined in the flickering light of Floyd O'Lantern. "We've got a grave to rob." The gate locked itself behind them. It was late now, and few people remained out and about on Main Street, which was probably a good thing. Why? Emily had taken her place in the center of the wagon, just as she had when they rolled down the hill. Floyd sat safely between her knees, just as he had when they rolled down the hill. Cat stood at the front of the wagon bed, just like he had when they rolled down the hill. Bat fluttered alongside, just like... Oh, you get it. Only this time they were rolling up the hill. The wagon accelerated with unadulterated glee, flexing on any confused bystander, letting them know that wagons can roll all sorts of directions if you simply let them be themselves. As there were few cars on the road, Emily steered them through the street this time. She was on a mission, after all, and time was not on her side. This seemed a perfectly reasonable choice, right up until the police cruiser pulled behind them and hit its lights. "Oh, shucks," Emily sighed as she pulled over. She was out of Officer Robinson's jurisdiction, which would guarantee him a good night's sleep for once. "Cat, you handle this." "Me?" Cat asked. "I'm guessing you have experience with the police. Besides, I have a plan." They all sat tight for a moment, keeping hands, paws, and wings where the officer could see them, out of basic respect. A moment later the officer appeared, shining his light on Emily and company. "Yes, officer?" Cat asked him before he could get a word out. The police officer blinked. "Were we speeding?" Cat followed up. This was not a report the officer wanted to write. He'd be sent for a psych eval. Even if the dashcam recorded everything, men in black suits would show up and take the footage away, and he'd be called a lunatic. "My mistake," he said to the talking animal. "Carry on." With that, he got back in his car and pulled away as quickly as possible, praying for a burglary, flying cow report, or some other routine thing to make him forget this entire transaction. As Emily watched him go, she realized where they'd stopped, across the street from the dance studio. When she looked at the top floor, she could see the young ballerina through the upstairs window. She was still dancing, this time to a classical piece Emily recognized. "Saint-Saëns," Emily named the composer out loud. The young woman abruptly stopped her performance and looked down at the little witch. For just a moment, their eyes locked. Then the ballerina gasped and vanished, like she'd never been there at all. It all happened in an instant. She was gone, the room was black, and the boards were back over the window. Everything told Emily she had just imagined it. But Emily knew better. "Nice try," she said with an odd smile. "I'll be back for you." Then the wagon took off as rapidly as the police cruiser had, climbing to the end of the street and rolling its way to a stop in Hilltop Cemetery, near the fallen gravestone of Owen Rowland, where Floyd had been born. Emily climbed out of the wagon and carried Floyd to the center of the small graveyard. He would provide all the light they needed to do what had to be done. She took the invitations from the wagon and handed them to Cat and Bat, by which I mean she stuck one batch in Cat's mouth and another in Bat's clawed feet. "Go deliver these," she told them. Then she whistled. The faithful shovel rushed from its hiding place in the woods like an excited puppy dog. Emily seized it from the air and set to digging a double-wide trench, so that she could exhume Owen's coffin and stand level with it without standing on it. As she dug, Cat leapt graveplot to graveplot, dropping each invitation where it belonged. As the envelopes landed, ghostly hands appeared to claim them. Bat, however, was having no such luck. He couldn't find a single one of his guests, no matter how hard he tried. Emily?" he called to the busily digging witch. "I can't find these anywhere." "You can. There is one stone you haven't checked." "Here?" he asked. Bat fluttered above the nameless marker, a small cross in the corner where he and Cat used to sit as human boys, throwing rocks at the gravestones and the arch. "There," she answered. "How many of these?" "All of them," Emily told him. "Really?" He had a whole stack. Emily stopped digging and looked at him knowingly. "Yeah." "Oh," he said, suddenly sad with his realization. He swooped low and placed the envelopes thoughtfully on the ground. "Here you go." Then he watched in amazement as each one was taken. "I hope you can all come to our party." The invitations delivered, he and Cat returned to Emily's side. "Why don't you just make the shovel dig?" Cat suggested. "I could, but what fun would that be? The whole point of grave robbing is to do it yourself." Armed with her magic shovel and a witch's determination, Emily unearthed Owen's coffin with otherworldly speed. After several more minutes, the shovel struck wood. "Victory!" Emily declared. She brushed the remaining dirt to one side. Cat and Bat looked down into the pit to see the lid of the modest coffin. "What now?" Cat asked. Emily looked at him like, duh. "Oh, gross," he said, face to face with the moment he knew was coming. "Open sesame!" Emily ordered. The lid of the coffin popped open, revealing a bare skeleton. A skeleton that sat bolt upright and looked at them, by which I mean it pointed its empty eye sockets in their general direction. "Hello," he said in a friendly manner. "Hello," Emily said. "Ah!" Cat and Bat said. "Don't mind them, they have no manners," Emily told the skeleton. "I'm Owen," said the skeleton. I was." The skeleton looked itself up and down. "Oh, I don't look so good." "Don't worry, you are going to look great." The skeleton stared at her blankly, waiting for an explanation. "I'm Emily. I'm a witch." Skeleton Owen slid backwards and away. "Are you a scary witch?" "Yes," said Cat and Bat. Emily had to consider that. She didn't think so, but there may have been evidence to the contrary somewhere. "Are you a pizza delivery boy?" she asked Owen. "No." "Or a good cop trying to clean up after me?" "No." "Extraterrestrial federal agents trying to cover up UFO encounters?" "No." "A second-rate patch of fog that calls itself the Gray Mist?" "No, I was an encyclopedia salesman." "Then I'm harmless," she put him at his ease. "Probably." "But what does a witch want with me?" "This," Emily responded, producing Owen's invitation to the Great Frog Hollow Halloween Ball. The skeleton opened it and read it. "Will there be potato pancakes and baked cinnamon apples, pierogies and sauerkraut?" "Yes," she promised, making a mental note to have those things on the menu. Then, for good measure, she added, "And scrapple!" "Yuck!" he cried. For just a moment, Emily considered kicking the coffin lid closed and reburying him, but she forced herself to get a grip. Besides, Owen was getting sad, and quickly. "Wait, how am I going to eat? I don't have a stomach. Oh, this is terrible." "Hey," Bat called, "he doesn't have a heart either." "I don't need a heart anymore," Owen answered before Emily could scold Bat. "Maybe not," Emily replied, "but there is one thing you need."
What?
What? Owen, Cat, and Bat asked. "A tuxedo." As Emily saw it, which was admittedly somewhat different than a normal person might, There just had to be a tuxedo shop open around here somewhere. After all, this was a semi-rural town, and it was late on a random Friday night. As they wandered down Main Street, Emily pulling the wagon so as not to draw any unwanted attention this time, she paused at a mailbox and dropped the envelope addressed Fireflies, somewhere in summertime, safely inside. It had no stamp. Partway down Main Street, she found what she was looking for. Messrs. Cooper and Danzig's Evening Wear, established 1967. She pulled the door. It was locked, so she knocked politely. When Monsieur Danzig opened the door, he saw an interesting sight. A small girl was standing there in patent leather shoes, pulling a red wagon, complete with a skeleton straddling a lit jack-o'-lantern, a black cat, and one circling bat. "We are in need of your services," Emily explained with the utmost dignity, "specifically a fitted tuxedo." "I'm afraid we are closed." Emily held up a 3-inch thick wad of US dollars in varying denominations. "As I was saying," Monsieur Danzig continued, "but we are due to reopen now." He swung the door open and made his big mistake. Emily was inside. "What do you have in a size this?" she asked him, pointing at the skeleton. "Slim fit?" he asked. As far as he was concerned, it was none of his business if a little girl wanted to dress up her model skeleton. Clearly it was as a Halloween decoration. "We'll need it 1 or 2 sizes up. He'll be in his ghost form when he wears it." "But of course." He led her to the south wall, where a variety of black and white tuxedo jackets hung, waiting to be matched with a pair of black pants. With a few mixed color combos and the wrong shoes, it would be easy to accidentally form a ska band. But Monsieur Danzig only sold the right shoes and the right colors. Based on his quick assessment of Owen, he selected one white jacket and a pair of unhemmed pants. Then he turned to get the skeleton from the wagon, only to find it standing over in the blue pinstripe suit section. He raised one eyebrow, then carried on. Eyeing the skeleton up again, he effortlessly pulled a white tuxedo shirt from the shirt racks as he came up behind him. "See anything you like?" he asked jokingly. "Don't answer," the cat at his feet told the skeleton. "He'll know something is up." Monsieur Danzig stared at the cat. "Oh," Cat realized. "Meow." "Meow," Monsieur Danzig replied, returning to his client. He placed the shirt on the skeleton expertly, and did a highly professional job of not noticing the skeleton was assisting him, moving under its own power. "He does that," Emily explained. The clerk nodded, then handed the skeleton the tux and simply motioned to the dressing room. After he watched Owen walk into the dressing room, he turned and stepped into his office for a moment. Emily heard a glass being filled and then quickly slammed down on a table. When Owen emerged from the dressing room, Monsieur Danzig was in position, ready to close the sale, no matter what. "Dude, you are totally James Bond!" Bat called to Owen as he stepped before the trifold mirror. In a matter of moments, Monsieur Danzig had made chalk marks on the pants indicating the best way to take them in. He turned to Emily and looked at her, his question obvious in his very French eyes. "I agree with the shirt and pants, but let's go with the black jacket." "An excellent choice," he agreed. As he swapped out jackets, Emily waved her right index finger at Owen's tuxedo pants, commanding a scissors, needle, and thread to make the necessary adjustments. "Ow!" cried Owen as Emily accidentally stabbed him. "You must follow the markings exactly as indicated. My work is flawless," Monsieur Danzig chastised her. "My bad." He looked at her. But of course." He nodded in approval. This girl had potential. In a matter of minutes, the skeleton was completely fitted with a fine black tuxedo, white shirt, brass cufflinks, black bow tie, black belt, black socks, and replica alligator shoes. Emily felt alligator skin only belonged on, alligators. "You the man!" Floyd bellowed. "Indeed," Monsieur Danzig validated him. Owen turned and walked back to the wagon. Before he could climb in, Monsieur Danzig caught his arm. "Sir, you are to be seen in this. There is no need to hide." Owen smiled. "I think. It's hard to tell in these situations." Emily paid the very reasonable bill for such excellent service, while Owen stepped into the street, looking like $1,000,000. "Ah!" screamed a woman who was walking down the hill. "Good evening, ma'am." Owen greeted her with his newfound confidence. In the face of such class, she rapidly composed herself, nodded her greetings, and quickly walked off, genuflecting as she went. "Mission accomplished," Emily declared as she emerged from the store along with the whole crew. Monsieur Danzig locked the door behind her and killed the lights. "Now there is one last invitation to deliver. Owen?" "Yes?" he asked Emily. "Show me where she is." "You want me to—" "Yes." "But I don't know where she is." "I'm pretty sure I do. If I'm right, where would she be?" Skeleton Owen knew where she was. He was scared. "Does she have to see me like this?" Owen evaded Emily's question. "She didn't want me when I was handsome." "You can wait outside. Tonight. Now lead on." Owen continued down the hill, a skeleton in a tuxedo pulling a red wagon with a black cat, a glowing carved pumpkin, and one small witch. Bat flew along his side, telling him how good he looked. When he got alongside his destination, he refused to go any further. "Just like I thought," Emily said. "The Ophelia Blaupunkt Academy of Dance, established 1932, Floyd announced. "Oh, my precious Elizabeth," Owen suddenly cried. He slumped against the wall, his skull face first in his hands. "What's the matter with Bones Boy?" Bat asked. "He can hear her," Emily answered. "Listen." If you listened closely, you could hear a lonely young woman crying in the dark. The Dance Academy door was locked, but it opened for Emily nonetheless. When she entered the hallway, the crying abruptly stopped, and everything became deathly silent. Only Bat and Cat followed her in. Owen waited outside with the wagon and Floyd. "I'm scared," said Bat. "Me too," said Cat. "Of what?" asked Emily. "She's a ghost." "You're a talking bat. That's much worse." "Hey!" "She's kinda right," said Cat. Bat swooped. "Hello!" called Emily. She received no reply. "She's here," Emily said, undeterred. "If she doesn't want to be seen, let's just put the invitation down and go," Cat suggested. Bat thought that was a good idea. "I want to talk to her," Emily said with a mean tinge to her voice. Elizabeth had mistreated Owen as far as she was concerned. "She'll show herself soon enough." "How do you know?" "I just have to find something she has. It's not hers." "Hello, Miss Ghost? We're friendly," Bat called, thinking it was a good idea. There were several dance studios on the first floor, and a main studio on the second. Each floor had dressing rooms and bathrooms. There was a business office on the first floor. Emily went straight upstairs. Elizabeth had been the star student performer. She would have had her own dressing area off the main studio, and the main studio was where Emily had seen her. "Hello, Elizabeth? I'd like to meet you," Emily called to her. Nothing. "Look for a small black box," Emily ordered. "With a ring in it," Bat said. He wasn't totally daft. Emily found what had been Elizabeth's dressing area. There was a beautiful, cream-colored French vanity with an ornate trifold mirror and a matching armoire. The plaque on the wall above the mirror read, "Elizabeth Oglethorpe." There were a handful of newspaper clippings lining the mirror, praising her most famous performances. And there was a photo of a smiling, dark-haired young boy. Emily picked it up and looked at it closely. She turned it over and read the handwritten note on the back. "With love, your Owen." Emily put the photo back in its place. There was nothing further on the vanity save for a medium wooden box made of black walnut with a brass latch. "That's too big to be the ring box," Cat said. Emily said nothing and just stood there, staring. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Emily lied. "It's not the right box." Cat hooked his paw around one armoire door and pried it open. "Bingo!" Bat shouted. Emily reached for the middle shelf and pulled out the black box. When she opened it, they all saw two things. They saw the ring, and they saw a beautiful ballerina with flowing blonde hair step out of the wall. Kat's blood froze. Bat fainted for a moment, but woke when he bounced off the vanity. "Don't take it, please. It's all I have," the ghost girl begged. "Hello, Elizabeth." "No one has called me that It's been so long I can't remember. My name is Emily." "You came to take my ring?" "It isn't yours, but you kept it anyway." Emily was not scared of any ghost. She was looking for a confrontation. "Please, there's nothing here for me without it, but I have nowhere to go, and I couldn't find my way if I tried." Kat and Bat suddenly felt sorry for her. "Will you tell me about you and Owen?" Emily asked her. "You scare me, but I'd rather be scared and have someone to talk to than to be all alone. When you leave, I don't think anyone will ever come to talk to me again." "You left him," Emily said. She knew that fact in itself could never be a problem. It was how she left him and why that bothered Emily. "Owen was the most wonderful boy I ever knew. At night I'd put my head on his shoulder and we'd look out at the stars. It gets so dark in these mountains you can see out past forever. We'd talk about these fantastic dreams we had, silly childhood dreams about having the whole universe together." "But he couldn't give you the universe." "He could. He was the only one who could, but I made a terrible mistake. Every night he was away fighting, I went to bed terrified I'd lose him to the war. I never thought I'd lose him to my own blindness." "You were becoming famous." "That's what they told me on Broadway, and I listened to temptation instead of my heart. I listened to an ego I didn't know I had. They showed me a world of wonders like no other. So I said goodbye to Frog Hollow. Owen tried to keep me." "Because he loved you." "More than anyone else ever would. He proposed, and I broke his heart just like the stone says. I know I was wrong every moment I dance here alone and unloved." "Why did you come back here?" "To teach." "To teach? This school was still open when I returned. It didn't fail until Ophelia herself died. Here, I was somebody. In Manhattan, I was just average. There were dancers that were more skilled or more beautiful, sometimes both. The same agency that lured me away from Frog Hollow lost interest in me as soon as they had newer, better prospects. Some of those girls made it big, but most of them ended up just like me, forgotten and lost in a vast city." "So you came home?" "I tried to come home, the only place I was ever happy. I worried Owen might be married and I'd have to see what a mistake I'd made. He couldn't afford another ring even if he'd wanted to." The ghost clutched at her heart and turned away in shame. "I didn't know what to do when I rejected him. I knew how badly I hurt him. I wanted to try to show him that I'd always remember him. But I got it wrong, so very, very wrong. I didn't mean to, I swear." Elizabeth's ghostly lip was trembling, her eyes filled with ghostly tears. "I wanted to tell him, to explain myself, but when I came home I didn't see him anywhere. When I looked for him I couldn't find him. So I asked an old acquaintance where he had gone. She told me he was in Pauper's yard." The ghost collapsed at her old dressing booth, face down, sobbing into her translucent arms. Emily felt bad for her. She'd thought she didn't like Elizabeth, because of how she'd treated Owen. But that was the thing, the lesson you always had to be reminded of. Sometimes, when you get to know somebody, you can understand them. And sometimes, when you do, you find out they aren't so bad after all. Emily picked up the ring to take it with her. Elizabeth sensed it and turned on her. "Will you let me keep it?" she pleaded. "It's all I have left." "I came to make you a deal," Emily told her. "I need to borrow it temporarily." "Oh, no, please!" "Temporarily. In exchange, this is for you." Emily handed the ghost a white lace envelope addressed to Miss Elizabeth Oglethorpe. The ghost girl took the envelope and opened it. "How can I attend?" Elizabeth asked. "I'm not real anymore. I'm just a ghost." You are real. You are a ghost. I am a witch. And I am your friend." "Me too," said Bat. "Me too," said Cat. "You're cool by me." "Me?" "Elizabeth Oglethorpe," Emily assured her. "You." "What are they doing in there?" Skeleton Owen asked Floyd from outside. His voice carried. It was one the ghost hadn't heard in decades. She gasped. "He's near, isn't he?" "Yes." "I miss him. Will he be at the ball?" "Come and find out." "I'd like to, but I'm afraid I'll miss it. I am not good with time and direction." "Hold it to your heart," Emily instructed her. "It will do the rest." "Thank you." "Tomorrow night, Turtle Hall, sunset to midnight." Elizabeth pressed the invitation to her heart. "Will your guests want a ghost there?" "Come as you are. I expect many." Without warning, Elizabeth turned and stepped into the wall. It was rather unnerving if you weren't used to it. "Let's go," Emily told Cat and Bat. She didn't have to say it twice. As they left the dance studio, Emily took one last thing, the wooden box that sat atop Elizabeth's old dressing booth. Back on the quiet streets of Frog Hollow, Owen followed them, dejected by being so close to his lost love and still so far away. "Why did you take her ring away?" Bat wanted to know. "That seems mean." "Says the bully," Emily evaded him. "So why did you?" "Its presence was helping trap her there. Besides, it's not really hers." "It could be, though." "She'll get it back?" Emily looked at Owen. "I have a theory, but we'll have to wait and see." "Will she come to the ball?" Cat asked. "I don't know," Emily admitted. "I hope so." They walked silently into the graveyard, and Emily and Owen climbed down into the hole Emily had dug. Owen sat back in his coffin. Emily handed him the box containing his ring. "But I don't need the money now," he said. "No, you don't. You need this ring." Owen considered the implications. "I'm scared," he told her. "I understand," she replied. "That's why we prepared. You have a new tuxedo, you have your ring, and you have an invitation." The skeleton stared gratefully at his things. "The rest is up to you and her," Emily told him. Skeleton Owen nodded. Then he lay back and went to sleep. Once she was certain he was dreaming away, Emily reached under his chest to where his heart had been. She placed the black walnut box she had taken from the dance studio safely inside his rib cage. Then she and her faithful magic shovel reburied him. "Can we go home now?" Cat asked. "It's been a long, crazy night, and I'm tired." "We have one last thing to do before we can go back to Turtle Hall. Bat, this one is for you." She handed him a bag of magic dust. Instinctively, he knew what he was being asked. He flew over the entire graveyard, dusting every inch of the ground with the contents of the bag. It sparkled pretty colors in the air before vanishing into the earth. When he finished, Emily and Cat took their places around Floyd in the wagon and prepared for one last ride down the hill. Emily looked back at Owen's fallen stone. When she did, she noticed something in the silvery light of the moon that she hadn't seen previously. She realized that the stone had been vandalized once before. Someone had scratched 2 words into its front ever so faintly. "I'm sorry." It was around noon the next day when Joe pulled his pickup truck back into Turtle Hall's long driveway. Halloween! When he got there, he found Emily sitting under a tree by the river, playing cards with a black cat and a carved pumpkin. She had a red wagon next to her with what appeared to be a bat lying upside down in the wagon bed. "I was afraid I'd find you here," he said. "I was afraid I'd find you here, too," Emily greeted him back. "Schedule move up?" "No, I was just up the hill finishing that thing you asked me to do. I figured I'd stop by and eat my lunch by the river. Just sit here and look at the old place." "It's a beautiful day for it," Emily said. "You didn't touch that bat, did you?" he asked. "Cat put him there," she said, pointing to the black furball. "Good. Make sure you don't. You don't want any nasty diseases." He went back to his truck and got his lunch bag and a hard hat like the one he was wearing. He walked back over and put the helmet on Emily's head. It practically swallowed her.
"That will have to do. I'm supposed to kick you out again, but you'll just come back, won't you?"
She nodded her head under the giant helmet. She looked ridiculous. He sat down and unwrapped his sandwich. It was huge.
"Italian roast pork," he said with a big smile. "Sharp provolone and long hots."
He handed half to Emily. "Thank you," she said. "I've never had lunch with a contractor."
"I'd never eaten lunch with a witch and a dead bat."
"He's not dead. Bats sleep in the day."
"He's out cold."
"Have you ever seen a bat wake up? It's so cute. They actually yawn. Then, if they aren't already elevated, they climb up on something so they can drop into the air."
"You, know a lot about bats."
"Don't you go home for lunch?" Emily changed the subject before she accidentally told him why. She didn't want him thinking she was weird, given she'd been doing such a good job of being normal, talking to spiders, pulling a bat in a wagon.
"I can't. I live hours away. I'm staying in the hotel on the other side of the bridge while I finish this job."
"The Imperial on 4th Street?" Emily asked.
"Yeah, why?"
"Room 240 is haunted. Come to think of it, so is 112, 332, and the entire 5th floor."
"And how would you know?"
"I did an unauthorized paranormal investigation there once. I made a major discovery."
"Oh, really? What was that?"
"The hotel staff don't like unauthorized paranormal investigations." "I'm still banned."
Joe shook his head and laughed. "So now you stick to breaking into construction sites with a sleeping bat."
"And a cat. These are the two that busted up the graveyard."
"A cat and a bat did that?"
he asked, not believing her. "They were human boys at the time."
"But they're in their Halloween costumes now."
"Very funny. I turned them into a cat and a bat." "Technically, I just swapped their consciousnesses with a cat and a bat that were lurking there. Right now, their regular bodies are sitting at home watching TV and ignoring their parents, except for the occasional meow or screeching sound."
"So you turned them into a cat and a bat to teach them a lesson?"
"Kind of. It's more so they can do some good to make up for it. I don't have high hopes they'll actually learn anything from this experience."
"Hey!" objected Kat. "Who said that?"
Joe asked, scared of what the answer might be. Emily looked right at Kat. "Let's just say, if they start playing sports instead of causing trouble, I'll take that as a victory."
"You have a great imagination,"
Joe faux complimented Emily, trying to pretend the cat didn't just talk. "No, I don't. It's awful."
"Whatever you say."
"Well, in that case, what are you doing tonight?"
"I was going to stay in my hotel room after I get off the phone with my wife. Halloween isn't my thing without my kids around. I miss 'em."
Emily handed him an invitation. He read it and smiled, but then he just shook his head.
"It sounds really neat, but you know this can't really happen, right?"
"No," Emily dismissed him.
"There's lots of great streets around here. You could just trick-or-treat with your friends, or your parents."
"Everyone is going to be coming here."
"Oh, are they?"
"Come and see," she dared him. "I'm a witch."
"Sounds like I'm going to have to," he replied. "I'm really hoping you don't make me kick you out. I think I like witches."
When he finished his sandwich, he walked back to his truck and started rummaging through his equipment boxes in the bed. Emily saw him locate a wire scrubbing mitt, a can of rust-proof black paint, and a strong rubber mallet. Once he verified he had those things, he put them back. Then he climbed into the driver's seat.
"You know, I think I'm going to head back up the top of the hill," he called to Emily. "There's something else I want to get done while there's still enough light."
Emily smiled. "You are a good man, Joe the contractor."
"Thank you, Emily the good little witch."
She watched him pull out and head off up the mountainside. When he was gone from sight, she checked the angle of the sun. There were about 4 hours to go. Then it would be time for the great Frog Hollow Halloween Ball. When dusk came, the fireflies came. First a handful, then a dozen or more. Tens became hundreds, and hundreds thousands, then thousands upon thousands. They filled the skies. finally forming a single line in a procession that stretched for miles through the valley. People everywhere looked up in amazement, wondering what had caused such a light show, one that they had never seen before and would never see again. When Emily opened the massive French doors of Turtle Hall, the fireflies flew into the mansion, taking up residence in the sconces and the lamps, and lining the ceilings. Turtle Hall was aglow. In their light, the mansion was as it had been, not as it was now, as it was originally in all its gilded splendor. All rooms were open for exploration. However, the center of the action would be, without a doubt, the grand ballroom with its massive marble dance floor. Circular tables were arranged on the north and south sides of the floor. The east wall was lined with long rectangular tables. One end held the food, the other DJ Floyd's custom rig guaranteed to rock the house. There were hamburgers and hot dogs and coal region barbecue, chili, cheesesteaks, and pizza and chips and dip, soft pretzels, German and Polish sausages, sauerkraut and pierogies, Amish macaroni salad, and redskin potato salad, and deviled eggs, shoe-fly pie, funnel cakes, birch beer for the kids and adult beer for the adults, sweet tea and hot tea, and coffee. Just for Owen, there was a breakfast bar with pancakes of all types, baked cinnamon apples, eggs, potatoes, bacon, and cream-chipped beef. As this was Emily's party, there was scrapple. Scrapple with apple butter, scrapple with syrup, scrapple with gravy and biscuits, and scrapple with scrapple. Halloween candy was everywhere. It was party time, and thanks to Emily's magic, all things were possible. The guests began to arrive quickly. Many had followed the fireflies. Some stopped by when they saw the lights on. Others had invitations. Many others simply appeared. As ghosts are terrible at keeping secrets, word of the party had spread like wildfire, until every spirit in the mid-Atlantic region knew Emily Spellmaker was up to something. They came from all walks of life, as all were welcome. A former U.S. president or two might have been seen strolling the second-floor hallways. When Joe arrived to check on the property, his jaw dropped open. He wandered into the ballroom and confronted Emily, who was obediently wearing her hard hat and complying with absolutely nothing else. "This is real. You're really doing it," he said, amazed. "You knew I would." "I didn't. I thought I was going to call your parents to see if they objected to me taking you trick-or-treating. I didn't want you to be alone." "No danger of that," she said. No, there isn't," he agreed, looking about the room in sheer disbelief. "Are you going to kick us out?" "Is that pumpkin DJing?" Joe had caught sight of Floyd's rig. He had custom headphones and a pulsing condenser mic, 2 turntables, one of which was an antique Victrola, and a Marshall amp stack that would have made classic heavy metal bands drool from Birmingham to Long Island. As Floyd rocked the house, he rocked back and forth, all manner of colored pulsing light flashing from him to the beat of the tunes, and boy could he pick them. Or summon them, anyway. His selections levitated before him, and put themselves on the turntable or back in their sleeves at his whim. The dance floor was packed. "Music by DJ Floyd. Come as you are, just like I promised." "I brought you this," Joe said, looking down at the black felt witch hat he held in one hand. He lifted the helmet off Emily's head and plopped the witch hat down in its place. "That's perfect!" Bat called at Emily as he swooped by. Children were running all around them, human and ghost together, playing games from the present and the past. "I'm going to go work the door," Joe told her. "Why?" "This is a mansion, and this is a ball, and I'd like to meet some of our guests." "I think that's an excellent idea." With that, Joe took position just inside the ballroom door. With each arriving guest, he took their coat and made an imposing formal introduction. "Presenting Benjamin Murray!" His voice boomed across the floor. The crowd let out a raucous cheer. Benji smiled for the first time in over 100 years. He felt like somebody, because he was. And with that, he ran off to play. "Presenting Owen Rowland!" Milton had been dancing with a box elder bug on the DJ table, and they both stopped to look. As did Floyd, as did Cat, as did Bat, as did Emily. And there he stood, the boy she'd seen in the photo. Owen would have been handsome in anything, but tonight he was in a stunning black tuxedo that matched his hair and complemented his mysterious yet happy brown eyes. How old was he? Emily wondered, looking at him. At that moment he could have been 18. He could have been 24. He'd never lived a year beyond that age. No matter, he was here, and he was smiling. The crowd cheered as he entered and surveyed the room. "His taste in formal wear is unassailable," Monsieur Danzig noted as he sipped his birch beer. "Wherever do you think he attained it?" "Surely I cannot guess," Monsieur Cooper replied with a wry smile. Owen found himself drawn to the far corner of the room, and soon enough he was seated next to Emily in the far corner, quickly joined by Cat and Bat. "She's not here," he said. "Yet," Emily finished. "Hello to you, too." "Hello," he said, grateful to his new friends. "If you aren't going to dance, you should check out the food selections. I think you'll find them to your liking." "I'm sure I will. This looks wonderful."
"Presenting Randall and Amelia Jones!"
"Chief!" Owen called. He hadn't seen Chief Jones since, well, that night.
"Hey, kid!" Chief Jones called back. "You did great out there. You were an honor to the department."
"You were the pride of Frog Hollow Station Number 1, Owen called back. At the front door, the mayor of Frog Hollow appeared, the current, living one, surrounded by a permit inspector and several police officers. This should have terrified Joe. No one should have been in the mansion, but it didn't bother him at all.
"This is exactly what it looks like," he told the mayor.
"But what is it?" the mayor asked, trying to comprehend what he saw. "Halloween," the inspector answered, a smile across his face. He rushed across the room to grab a plate. "Coal Region barbecue is the best!" "You know," the mayor began, "we saw the whole town headed inside, and we thought there might be a problem."
"Is there, Mr. Mayor?"
"I do believe I just saw my uncle walk by. I haven't seen him since he died. I think I'll go catch up with him. You all have a wonderful evening."
"Happy Halloween, Mr. Mayor."
"Happy Halloween," the mayor called back as he headed for the curved main staircase in pursuit of his relative.
"Uncle Jack!"
Joe introduced the officers one by one, and the crowd went wild. Emily and Joe were both looking across the floor, happy at the success, but Emily had not achieved her primary objective yet. Joe, on the other hand, was winning right and left. When he noticed a nervous young ghost leaning against one wall of the dance floor, he traced his gaze and saw an equally nervous young ghost girl across the way. It was clear they wanted to dance, but even now their shyness crippled them. Joe abandoned his post and walked over to the young man who was trying to muster his courage.
"Hey there."
"Hi," he said, slightly nervous at the sight of the big man approaching.
"I'm Joe."
"My name's Tim."
You fancy her, Tim?"
He nodded across the way, but subtly, so as not to raise alarm. "Well, she sure is pretty, and she isn't dancing with anybody."
"So? Why not you?"
"What if she says no?"
"Listen, I don't think that's going to happen here. Why don't you give it a shot, and if she says no, well, she says no. At least you tried."
"Here goes everything." Tim walked toward her, and her eyes went wide when she saw him coming. "Do you want to, maybe—" "Yes!" the shy girl shouted, seizing his hand and running him onto the dance floor. Joe was getting the hang of ghosts. They were just like you and me, because once upon a time, they had been just like you and me. Owen returned to the table with a plate of food and waited. Emily hoped it wouldn't be long. She was momentarily distracted when Joe announced,
"3 men in black."
They nodded at Emily from behind their government-issue sunglasses. Tonight, however, not even MIB could bother her. They were likely just here for the cheesesteaks. Besides, before they could get 10 feet into the room, Messrs. Cooper and Danzig were on them, explaining that their particular black, while technically black, wasn't the black that best projected their image, and just like that, the impeccable French tailors had everything under control.
"Hey, boss lady," Bat called Emily. "Where is she?"
"Yeah," asked Kat. Emily answered their questions, but to Owen. "She's seen Manhattan. She's going to be fashionably late." It was no longer fashionably late. It was very late. In another hour or so, the great ball would be over. The living trick-or-treaters were long gone home, in bed, their bellies full of candy. There were many, many guests still in attendance, but the crowd had steadily decreased as the evening wore on. Owen remained in the far corner of the ballroom next to Emily. He was nervous and upset. "Eat your potato pancakes and baked apples," Emily told him. "What if she doesn't come?" he replied. With every minute that passed, his hopes got smaller and his sorrow got bigger. "It's possible," Emily admitted. "She's free now. She can go anywhere in or out of the universe. That's good." "How is that good?" Owen protested. "If she comes, it means she wanted to. If she doesn't, it means she doesn't love me." Emily didn't answer him. "I can't die of a broken heart again," Owen told her. "Once was bad enough." "Finish your pancakes," Emily replied. Even she was getting nervous. Had she miscalculated? "They really are good," Owen said sadly. Before either could say anything else, Joe's voice came booming across the ballroom with his first introduction in hours.
"Presenting Miss Elizabeth Oglethorpe."
Owen sat up and looked at Emily. His ghostly heart skipped a beat. "Showtime," Emily told him, taking his plate. On the far side of the ballroom, Elizabeth stood in her finest black dress. It was one she'd bought on Fifth Avenue to impress Manhattan high society, but she'd found herself missing a boy from another place in time on all the occasions she wore it. She scanned the ballroom, hoping to see him here. Owen stood next to Emily, excited and terrified. He nervously checked his appearance. "You look great," Emily assured him. "Now go get her." He started across the room, and the crowd parted instinctively, as if they were all here just to witness this very moment. Suddenly the dance floor was clear. Then Elizabeth and Owen saw each other again. Warning! Attention, all little boys. What happens next is the yuckiest, most awful thing ever. It's the kind of thing girls like, and they can be crazy sometimes. If you want any chance of keeping your lunch in your stomach or maintaining your sanity, you will want to skip the next few paragraphs. "Surrealistic pillow," Emily called to DJ Floyd. "Side 1, track 4. Floyd obliged. The sounds of an acoustic guitar and tambourine began to fill the room. Owen and Elizabeth ran to each other. They did not glide like ghosts, but their feet touched the ground just like they had all those years ago when they were two kids chasing each other through the streets of Frog Hollow, crazy about each other. A moment before they could hug, they both stopped, scared, struggling with all that had driven them apart. He looked down, fearing her rejection again, feeling unworthy of her love. She looked away, ashamed of how she'd treated him and how arrogant and foolish she'd been. But then he looked up, and she turned back to him, and their eyes met. Their shared gaze told them everything. "Magic," Emily whispered as she watched. They fell into each other's arms and spun in their embrace. The ballroom, the mansion, the world, all spinning by them in a blur so that they could only see each other. Words were not necessary. The separation was gone, banished by forgiveness and replaced with joy. The past was over, and they were together again. And so Owen and Elizabeth began to dance. A slow, close dance that all the partygoers, both the living and the ghosts, watched in awe. Bat fought back a tear. Kat was too choked up to heckle him about it. When the song ended and their dance slowed, the crowd let out a cheer, and DJ Floyd kicked the dance floor into high gear with some Elvis. Everyone rushed to join Owen and Elizabeth. Turtle Hall was in full party mode. Only Emily hung back, content to watch her guests. She looked on as Elizabeth and Owen left the dance floor to get some food. She watched as they playfully shared their desserts, adoring each other like it was their first date. Then they ran from the room hand in hand, off to explore the mansion together. Before too long, only ghosts remained. They are experts at lingering, after all. That was fine by Emily. She was happy they were happy. She grabbed a big red plastic cup of birch beer and a plate of barbecue, mac and cheese. Did I mention there was mac and cheese? I think I forgot. And 3 pieces of scrapple. She put apple butter on one, syrup on the one next to it, and sausage gravy on the third. "Oh, I can hear your yuck. But this is her party, and she did a really good job of it, so she gets to eat what she wants, thank you very much." It was time for her to relax a little. Emily sat by herself in one corner, just long enough for Mr. Joe to get his plate and join her at the table.
"I'm going to have to go soon," Joe said. "I'm getting tired all of a sudden, and I have a tough day tomorrow."
"Soon it will be everyone's bedtime."
"You pulled it off," Joe said. "Congratulations."
"All of us did."
"You, me, a magic Jack,
Floyd."
Floyd O'Lantern, 1 talking spider, and 2 teenage delinquents you turned into a cat and a bat."
"Exactly."
"I've seen it all tonight. Am I going to remember this in the morning?"
"If you want to. Most adults rewrite their own memories anytime something bothers them."
"Like witches and ghosts."
"Do we bother you?"
"Not anymore," Joe said. "I think I like you magic critters more than some regular people I know."
"Good. Then you can trust me to lock up."
"I will. But tomorrow, it's all business."
"Tomorrow is tomorrow. I'll not speak of it further."
"Sorry."
"Try your barbecue."
"It's a sloppy Joe,"
Joe realized. They both laughed. And so Joe the contractor and Emily the witch had dinner together, the same day they had had lunch together.
"One last thing before I go,"
Joe said when they'd both eaten. "Yes?" Emily asked. She was excited to tell something she wanted to tell, or hide away something she wanted to hide.
"You never did tell me how you know this place."
"That's easy. I was friends with Sarah Winston when we were little."
"And who is Sarah Winston?"
"Alfred Miller's granddaughter, silly."
"The guy who built Turtle Hall?"
Emily nodded. "We played in these rooms. We had sleepovers. I hid things I wanted to save for later, for when I needed them." Floyd glowed brighter alongside his DJ rig.
"You were friends when you were little together."
Emily nodded, sipping her birch beer.
"So you are 150 or so years old?" Joe continued.
"More like thousands, probably. I'm—"
"A witch. Yes," Joe smiled. "You are."
"See? Easy." Joe stood to leave.
"The invitation was right," he said. "This was a great ball."
The clock struck midnight. The fireflies began to blink on and off, letting everyone know it was time to go. They started to leave their positions throughout the mansion, headed for their well-earned rest. As they slowly made their way from Turtle Hall, lingering so guests could see their way out, Emily thanked them. She had taken position at the front door, with Floyd sitting on a hall table on the other side of the doorway. His glow would provide all the light she needed once the fireflies were gone. As each room emptied, it returned to its ordinary final disarray, all evidence of the party vanishing with the guests. "Thank you for coming. See you again," she called as they set off to many different homes. Emily made it a point to call each one by name when she could, just as Joe had when they first arrived.
"Happy Halloween," they called back. "Witches host the best parties."
When Benji reached the door to leave, his happy glow was gone, and he had faded in a sad way. "Good night, Benji," Emily said. "Happy Halloween."
"I wish it wasn't over," the small ghost said. "I was happy again, for a little while. Now I have to go back to the lonely place."
"Do you?" Emily asked him sincerely.
"I don't know where else to go."
Emily had prepared for this. She'd left a box by the door filled with flashlights. She took one and handed it to Benji.
"What is it?"
he asked. He'd never seen one before. "Press the button," Emily instructed him. His ghostly finger was just able to push the plastic on-off button. A bright beam shone up at the ceiling. Benji looked on it amazed, but unsure what to do. Now, point it into the dark and tell me what you see." Benji turned and looked out the mansion doors. He pointed the beam into the darkness ahead of him. Then his face lit up brighter than any light ever could. "Mama!" he cried, before running into a pair of waiting arms and disappearing to where he'd always belonged. "Home run!" Emily congratulated herself. The shy girl and her new beau were the next to leave, happy in each other's company and young again. "We are going out for late-night milkshakes, chocolate malted," Tim announced. "One milkshake," the shy girl corrected him with a big smile. "2 straws." And just like that, there were only 2 guests left. Emily looked atop the great curved staircase and watched as Owen and Elizabeth descended, still hand in hand. They could barely look away from each other. Once they reached the door, they both smiled at Emily. She could see their gratitude in the warm glow of their faces. No words were necessary. They waved to her, then strolled from the mansion, Elizabeth's head on Owen's shoulder. They faded into the dark. Emily picked up Floyd and stood watching them from the patio. They were so faint as to be nearly imperceptible, even to her, but they were there. Owen had led his Elizabeth under a cherry tree alongside the river. Emily caught glimpses of them in the flickering of departing fireflies and the glint of light reflecting off the water. She watched them for some time, quite intently, until... "Yes!" Emily shouted with glee. "Yes, yes, yes, yes!" There was a bright flash outside by the river. It was gone as suddenly as it had come. Floyd's light glowed brighter for a moment, and he smiled, as if he had something he wanted to tell. With that, Emily walked back into the mansion and pulled the doors closed behind them. The great Frog Hollow Halloween ball had ended. The guests had gone, and the mansion had grown dark for the last time. It was time for a cat, a bat, a spider, and a witch to go to bed, safe in the nightlight glow of a Floyd-o-lantern. The sun rose, shining brightly on Turtle Hall's final morning.
"All clear?"
Joe called through the halls of the mansion as he went room to room. He wasn't going to take silence for an answer without verifying things with his own eyes.
"Hello, Emily, and friends,"
Joe greeted them, finding the little witch in the library where she always seemed to appear. "Hello, Mr. Executioner," Emily thought, but she would never say that out loud. He cared, and if it had to happen, he was the best man for it. "Nobody left but us," Emily answered. "Oh, and a bunch of critters."
"I'm kinda hoping the critters run when I tap the building the first time. I try to make some noise and vibration to give 'em a chance."
Emily thought that was nice of him, but she had a better idea. "Go!" she commanded. Her voice somehow echoed through the halls, walls, ceilings, and floors. In response, an army of mice, rats, squirrels, regular and flying, raccoons, 1 fox, a hedgehog, and a Luna moth conducted an orderly evacuation of the premises, exiting the doors and windows to safety in the woods near the riverbank. Joe was impressed, but no longer amazed. "Do much rewriting since last night?" Emily asked him.
"None. It was too much fun not to remember."
"There is one last thing we have to do before we go," she told him. "Correction. You have to do."
"What's that?"
Joe asked. Emily took the ceramic vase from its hiding place while he watched her reveal her secret. "Hold out your hands," she instructed. Joe was dubious, but he cupped his hands together and held them before the little witch. Emily inverted the vase, and the golden pumpkin seed dropped into his hands.
"A seed?"
"A magic seed," she corrected him.
"Of course. What does this magic seed do?"
"It grows a magic pumpkin, one that can tell a great story when carved by someone who loves it."
"What story can it tell?"
"Any that you ask of it, if you plant it in the right place."
"But why give it to me?"
"You are the best man for the job. For several 100 miles, maybe anywhere," she responded with a smile. "Now give the instructions." Joe looked at the little seed in awe. He understood the magnitude of this responsibility.
"I don't really know how to do this. What if I mess up?"
"You won't." Joe thought for a moment, then he knew what to say.
Tell me the story of this place, he told the seed in his hand. I mean, Turtle Hall. Tell all of it. Tell everything that happened here, beginning to end.
You are great at this, Emily said. Now find the perfect place to drop it. Joe was about to ask, how do I do that, but he decided to trust himself instead. He wandered the halls of the mansion one last time, letting its soul guide him. He looked up the winding main staircase. He crossed through the paneled dining room. Kat and Emily followed him as he went, Kat carrying a sleeping bat in his mouth and Emily carrying Floyd. Joe finally stopped in the ballroom. He found himself drawn to the center of the floor. There was a hole in the marble just big enough to drop a seed into the cellar below. There would be damp soil, and soon the remains of the magnificent house would push it down, deep into the ground.
Do a good job,
Joe said, giving the seed one last instruction. Then he dropped the seed and it disappeared from sight. They all stood in silence for a moment.
I bet you it's going to be a really, really big pumpkin, Joe told Emily hopefully.
The size of Turtle Hall, Emily assured him. They walked outside together, each exiting the mansion for the last time.
Okay, this is it,
Joe said, his voice sad but completely in charge.
You know how I've been bending the rules for you, letting you be places you shouldn't, mostly because I think you really are a witch?
Yes, Emily answered politely.
Not this time. Before I start, I need you to take your crew to the outside of the fence where you'll be safe. Maybe along the river.
Along the river it is, Emily agreed. Then Joe left for his crane as Emily loaded Milton, Floyd, Kat, and Bat into the red wagon and walked up the driveway. She pulled them around the outside of the fence and down alongside the river at a safe distance from which they could watch. A few minutes later, Joe's crew and an inspector arrived. It was time. Joe started his crane and its engine roared to life. He drove it to the side of the mansion and prepared to swing the heavy wrecking ball. He stopped and sat there a minute. Then he looked at Emily with a sad look on his face. Emily nodded. She wasn't instructing him to do it. She was telling him she understood. It did not take long. The wrecking ball swung, and the southwest chimney collapsed on impact, dragging its entire side of the roof with it, slate and bricks falling to the ground, exposing the servant bedrooms to the outside air. The crane moved further back and swung the ball again, taking down the northwest side of the mansion, and dragging away so much of the roof and upper floors that the interior chimneys fell, crashing through the carved center staircase, obliterating the marble floors below. The libraries were gone. The sitting rooms gone. The central hallway was no more. With large parts of the frame missing and badly damaged, the rest was done with the backhoe. Its long arm reached into the mansion's insides, the shovel claw smashing and tearing away everything it touched. It hooked, it pulled, and it battered, sending clouds of plaster dust into the air. When the remains of the east side collapsed, they came down on the grand ballroom floor, reducing it to marble shards and wooden splinters that came to rest in a pile that filled the basement that had at one time been below it. Turtle Hall was gone. "Floyd-o-lantern," Emily called, looking at the final massive cloud of dust. "I need you to tell me a happy story, right now." Floyd-o-lantern suddenly came to life again. His eyes shone wide and his flame flickered in anticipation.
"Oh, how I wish to tell it,"
Floyd answered, the glow of his flame suddenly so bright it was clearly visible in the daylight.
"But you must observe the formalities. Command me to tell what it is I know. Guess wrong, and the story is lost."
She wheeled on him, excitedly pointing to the cherry tree. "Tell me what you saw happen under this very tree last night," Emily commanded, with absolute certainty.
"Woohoo! I get to tell!"
"You may begin," she instructed, very formally.
"You have heard the story of Owen Rowland, the orphan who died of a broken heart?" Floyd began.
"We have," Emily noted, prim and proper.
Now listen closely, and you will hear how his story actually ends, by beginning anew. The clock had struck midnight, and the great Frog Hollow Halloween Ball had just ended. The blinking of fireflies filled the air as the small winged creatures returned to the summer lands from which they had been summoned. In the grand entranceway of Turtle Hall, a mansion as magnificent as any there had ever been or ever would be, stood Owen Roland. He stood tall and dashing in his brilliant black tuxedo. He stood strong as he had been in Normandy, and mostly he stood happily, for he was not alone. There, by his side, where she had always been meant to be, was Elizabeth Oglethorpe, his Elizabeth, holding his hand tightly in hers. From the top of the steps the whole world stretched out before them. Above their heads, the millions of stars they had gazed at so many years ago beckoned to them. Their star beckoned to them. On this magic night, all things were possible. All their hopes and dreams were ready to come true. Everything they thought they'd lost was still right there for the taking, if only they could get one little thing right. "What?" Cat asked excitedly. "Shh!" Emily shushed him. Owen was a valiant man of action, and he knew what to do. He strode down the stairs from Turtle Hall, Elizabeth following him, anxious to see where he was leading her. Keeping her hand safely in his, he walked her beneath the boughs of this very cherry-tree. In the moonlight, its beautiful pink blossoms were in full bloom, and their fragrance filled the night air as the river quietly flowed alongside them. The river-bank was muddy, and sure to ruin his black pants, but no matter, he had to do what he had to do. Owen went down on one knee. He reached inside his jacket and produced a small box. When he did, the fireflies grew interested. They stopped leaving and gathered around to witness what was about to happen. Owen opened the box. In it was a humble diamond ring. "A magnificent ring," Emily corrected him. "A humble and truly magnificent ring, for it was a ring bought in love, and none shines brighter at any price." Floyd threw the save. He looked up and into his Elizabeth's teary eyes. "My Elizabeth, my beautiful, wonderful Elizabeth," he said. "Yuck!" Cat spat, like he'd just gotten another spider in his mouth. I probably should have put another little boy warning in this part, but I didn't, and it's far too late now. Floyd's flame roared to life in disapproval, and Cat got back in line quickly. A single firefly flew into the stone itself, and when it lit its tail, 1,000 beams of multicolored light cut the night sky. "Marry me," Owen said, and Elizabeth Oglethorpe, once a brilliant young ballerina, once a vain and foolish young starlet, once a lonely, guilt-stricken old woman, was filled with joy. "Yes," she said. With that one word, Owen's heart healed, right there and then under this very tree. Elizabeth pulled him to his feet and took him in her embrace, and they— "Don't!" screamed Cat. "Kissed," Floyd continued. K-I-S-S-E-D, kissed! Cat put his paws over his ears in horror. The fireflies were overjoyed. They celebrated as only 1,000,000 magical fireflies can. They swirled around and around the forever young couple until there was a mighty flash. When the light faded, as quickly as it came, Owen and Elizabeth had gone off into eternity. And in the night sky, high above the ground on which they'd stood, their star glowed brighter than it ever had. After all, their dream had come true. They were happy ever after. "The end?" Cat asked. "The beginning," Floyd corrected him. "Yes, Floyd O'Lantern," Emily said, clapping delightedly. "That is exactly what I saw. You told us a wonderful story. Thank you." "It was the best Halloween ever," Floyd replied. "Now I may go happily."
It was a wonderful story, shared with wonderful friends, Milton said. And now I must be going too, for I have weeks of travel ahead of me before I can rest. Promise to send a postcard, Emily told him.
Do spiders send postcards? Cat asked.
Postcards are strange things, Emily answered rather cryptically. Cat observed Milton closer. He had donned a carefully folded parachute made of silk. For emergencies, Milton explained. Mine will be a treacherous journey across the water, but if my leaf overturns, I will float away on the wind. That could take you months out of your way, Emily noted. Or into the water, Cat added. Milton nodded resolutely. He was determined to get to his new home against any odds.
Do you, want to ride? Joe asked him. I'm headed across the bridge to get breakfast. Rico's on 4th Street.
In the old Pellegrini building? Milton asked, all 8 eyes lighting up.
Yeah, how do you know it?
My wife and I are taking up residence in the attic suite.
Then today is your lucky day, Joe said.
Yes, it is, Milton exclaimed. I will have to thank fate. Fate is boring, Emily told him. Coincidences are so much cooler. Joe reached his hand down, and Milton wasted no time scurrying up Joe's arm and into the pocket of his flannel shirt. He peeked out and waved. Say hello to Jennifer, Emily told him, waving back. Then she took the hard hat from her head and surrendered it to Joe.
Nah, that's yours. It looks good on you, he said, politely refusing it.
Emily plunked the helmet back on her head, as if to prove the point. It swallowed her as always.
So, I guess this is it,
Joe told her. She pushed the helmet up so she could see again. Unlikely.
How so?
I don't think you're going to be that lucky, she warned him. This is an until next time.
I think you're right, Joe said with an approving smile. Until next time, Emily the Witch. He held out his fist for a bump.
Until then, Joe the contractor, Emily replied, giving him his first witch fist bump. Joe walked inside the perimeter fence and opened his truck. He placed Milton atop the rearview mirror, then he climbed in and pulled his truck to the top of the driveway. He locked the fence behind him, sighing a moment at the sad ruins he'd created. Then he climbed back in the truck and drove onto Main Street, heading for the bridge. He hit the horn and waved to Emily and her remaining crew as he passed by. They watched the pickup truck disappear, on its way to deliver Milton safely to his new home weeks early, and Joe safely to his breakfast, more or less on schedule. Once it crossed the bridge and was gone from sight, Emily turned her attention to the carved pumpkin she was holding. Where shall I set you? She asked her friend. Will you see the top of the hill where you were born?
I believe I will stay here, Floyd answered. I am suddenly sleepy, and soon my eyes must close.
By the river, then, Emily replied. Floyd's eyes surveyed the riverbank for a suitable resting place. Place me just there, where I may have some shade and shelter, but not so much that the deer do not find me, Floyd instructed, looking over at a stretch of trees that lined the riverbank. You want the deer to find you? Cat asked. Floyd nodded, by which I mean his entire body rocked back and forth in Emily's arms. It is part of my purpose. It will be an honor to make their bellies full with an early Thanksgiving supper. You will be the best pumpkin pie ever, Emily assured him. Floyd smiled happily at the thought. Emily set him gently alongside the water, just inside the edge of the wood. She turned him to face the river, so he might watch its lazy current as he fell into his long sleep. Then she patted his head. Goodbye, Floyd O'Lantern.
Goodbye, strange little witch.
Cat gave him a rub, then jumped into the wagon alongside Bat. Emily took the wagon handle and began leading them away. She walked around the perimeter fence and up to the top of the winding driveway that no longer linked a house to the street. Then she stopped and took one last look at the debris that had been Turtle Hall. Farewell, old friend. She could hear Floyd snoring away as she resumed her long walk up the hill, a little girl in a hard hat pulling a red wagon with a cat and a sleeping bat toward Pauper's yard. Now, you two, it's time to survey your mischief. Emily pointed at Cat and declared, or perhaps ordered, Boy! Then she pointed at Bat, uttering the same arcane spell. Boy!" And just like that, two familiar boys stood where the cat and bat had been. But something was bothering Emily, something minor, but just slightly off. "Oh, that won't do," she declared, realizing what was wrong. She'd turned Richie into Billy and Billy into Richie. Their fathers were unlikely to be concerned, however their mothers might object. "Be who you are supposed to be," Emily commanded, very witch-like. "Okay," said a confused boy who was Billy when he said the O part, but Richie when he said K. Now there were two Richies, and they were even more confused. "Same for you," Emily incanted, pointing at the Richie that was Billy. Or was that the other way around? I'm not at all sure myself. Either way, once Richie was Richie and Billy was Billy, the boys looked all around them at the graveyard. The arch above the entrance stood upright, centered, proud, and tall. It displayed the ground's true name, Hilltop Cemetery, in shining black iron that was free from rust. The stones inside the cemetery were polished and beautiful, the names they remembered clear as the day they were engraved. Gone were the vines and stains, the graffiti and the trash, but most amazing was the ground on which they rested. Every square inch of the cemetery was covered in a blanket of bright, multicolored meadow flowers. Butterflies and bees happily traveled blossom to blossom without a care in the world. "But it's November," noted Richie. "What does this mean?" Billy asked. "That's easy," answered Emily. "No one is ever truly forgotten." "Whatever," said Billy. "Let's go play some ball." He and Richie walked off to go be teenage boys, without a glance back. Emily had one last thing to attend to. Joe had restored the toppled, broken gravestone just like she'd asked him to. He'd reset it so caringly you would never know that it had been broken in the first place. It was set so firmly it would never be broken again. But he couldn't do anything about the words. They were still wrong. The little witch knelt before it and rubbed her hands across the engraving. As she rubbed, the old words disappeared and the right ones took their place. When she finished, she stepped back and admired her work. The stone read, "Together Forever, Owen Rowland, 1924 to 1948, beloved of Elizabeth Oglethorpe." Elizabeth Oglethorpe, 1925 to 1993, beloved of Owen Rowland, happy in the ever after. Emily smiled, then she turned and vanished in the morning sunlight. In loving memory of Samantha A. Stoneback. Emily Spellmaker on All Hallows Eve, from the Chronicles of Emily Spellmaker, in no particular order, was written by S.W. Devlin and read by Christopher Davis. We hope you liked it. If you want more of Emily, all of S.W. Devlin's Emily Spellmaker and Witchwood Park books are available on Amazon. For those listening on YouTube, if there's an Emily story you'd like to hear on this channel, tell us in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to receive notifications about upcoming Emily Spellmaker audio recordings, radio plays, and podcasts. I'm Chris Davis. You can hire me for a wide range of entertainment services, including interactive educational theater and voiceovers. You can reach me through the links in the description below. This story, video, and audio recording are copyright Sean W. Devlin, all rights reserved. Thanks for listening, and visit us again soon. Happy Halloween!